Alice Fredenham stepped onto the Britain's Got Talent stage and stole the hearts of millions of people around the world. Simon Cowell gave her one of the biggest compliments he's ever given anyone, and her audition tape remains one of the most watched in the show's history. But what Alice did after the show ended left everyone stunned. She had all it takes to become the next big thing, but she made the decision to walk away, and the reason behind this decision is far darker than you could possibly imagine. Why did Alice Fredenham abandon the spotlight when it was the brightest? You'd be shocked to hear the truth about her personal life. Alice Fredenham started out like many others chasing a dream. There was something very delicate and emotional about her that drew millions of people around the world in, but then she disappeared from the spotlight just as quickly as she rose. Although she was dubbed the liquid gold of Britain's Got Talent, Alice actually stepped into the spotlight for the very first time in 2013 on another platform, The Voice UK, at the age of 28. With nerves hidden behind eyeliner and a soft smile, she sang the jazz classic The Lady is a Tramp. It should have been a show-stopping moment, but instead, not a single judge turned their chair for her. In fact, her performance was met with the kind of silence that burns through every layer of self-confidence you built. She walked off stage defeated, with only the echo of rejection in her ears. But that rejection would become the spark that ignited a different path. After trying out her luck on The Voice, Alice auditioned again, but this time for Britain's Got Talent. What made this audition so risky was the fact that she kept her plans a secret. She didn't tell her friends, family, or even her boyfriend at the time. But this little secret would turn out to be one of the biggest turning points in her life. However, there was one problem. For Alice, stage fright wasn't just a little jitter. It was debilitating. Her body would tremble, her voice would freeze, and she would experience the kind of anxiety that convinces you you're not worthy, even if you are. But that night, something was different. And as soon as she began singing My Funny Valentine, the judges and the audience were in awe. Her voice wasn't just beautiful, it was magic. And Simon Cowell, the man who rarely wears emotion, leaned forward with a look that said it all. In fact, when she finished, he told her she had a voice like liquid gold. And just like that, Alice Fredenham became an overnight viral sensation. The clip of her audition exploded online. Millions watched, and people felt something they couldn't quite explain. And although she looked like she had all the qualities of the show's winner, sometimes dreams that rise too fast often crash too hard. When she returned for the semifinals, the pressure was crushing and the expectations of both the fans and judges were sky high. But behind the scenes, things were falling apart for Alice. She had rehearsed one song, but was suddenly asked to change it at the last minute, and that one shift threw her completely off balance. Her stage fright suddenly came roaring back. She looked visibly shaken, and her performance, while still beautiful in tone, lacked the magic of her audition. Sadly, she was eliminated, and the girl with the golden voice was gone from the stage almost as quickly as she arrived. For fans who had fallen in love with her beautiful voice, it was heartbreaking. But people weren't just disappointed. They were also optimistic about her future. After the show, fans expected to see more of her in interviews, album announcements, and even tour dates. After all, she had all the qualities of a global star. But those never came. Her social media presence remained quiet, and there were no immediate signs of a music career taking off. And within months, it seemed like Alice Fredenham had simply vanished from the public eye, leaving one question on the minds of everyone. What really happened after the cameras stopped rolling? Her breakout audition and performance on Britain's Got Talent sparked serious conversations about Alice becoming the next breakout star from the show, and for a moment, that seemed entirely possible. Behind the scenes, industry players were also interested. In fact, shortly after her appearance, Sony Music reportedly offered Alice a demo deal. The idea was to explore whether she could record a full studio album and establish herself as a commercial artist. It was not a full contract, but it was a step that many contestants never even get. But just when it looked like things were finally looking up for her, as quickly as that door opened, it began to close. Alice entered the studio and began recording demos. But things didn't progress beyond that stage. The label decided not to move forward with a full album release. No official reason was made public, but multiple industry sources suggested the material didn't align with what Sony wanted commercially at the time. Alice had a distinctive vocal style, rooted in vintage jazz, not modern pop, and it probably didn't fit neatly into the mainstream market they were targeting. For Alice, that rejection was more than just professional. It became deeply personal. She had already been hesitant about fame and public performance. The entire journey had been emotionally demanding from the start. And so, being dropped after what seemed like her big chance to become a global star began to amplify the feelings of disappointment that had followed her devastating semi-final exit at Britain's Got Talent. Over the next year, she continued to pursue music independently, but the momentum she had built started to slow. And soon, Alice began quietly stepping away from the public eye. Her official website, which had once featured updates and media appearances, eventually went offline. Her social media accounts that were once a way for fans to connect with her directly became inactive. And what made fans even more worried was the fact that there were no press releases or formal announcements about her retirement or taking a break. Alice simply faded from the public's view, and the reasons behind this quiet disappearance were not just rooted in professional setbacks. There were more to it. In interviews she gave shortly after her time on Britain's Got Talent, Alice opened up about her struggles with confidence and performance anxiety. She described having stage fright that was so severe, it turned into panic attacks that would make her feel physically unwell before singing in public. But while many viewers admired her honesty and wanted more of her talent, it was clear that the demands of a music career, the constant visibility, high-pressure performances, and public critique clashed terribly with her temperament. And as the music industry shifted further towards social media presence and self-promotion, the pressure to stay visible and active grew. For someone already dealing with anxiety and self-doubt, it was an even bigger challenge. Although she had a fan base and a proven ability to connect emotionally through music, the business side of the industry was completely out of reach for her. By 2016, Alice had almost no digital presence left. Her album remained available for purchase online, but there were no signs of new recordings and no public appearances. For fans who had discovered her through a viral audition and followed her brief rise, it became unclear whether she was simply taking a break or walking away from the industry entirely. Mental health struggles may have played a larger role in her withdrawal than most realized at the time. And while Alice never made any public statements detailing her condition, the patterns were too familiar. Many artists who face sudden global attention the way she did, without preparation, often find the aftermath overwhelming. When combined with rejection, lack of support, and the constant pressure to perform, it can lead to burnout, anxiety, and a loss of creative drive. And just like that, Alice Fredenham, a talented singer who had once moved a room full of people with a single performance, had gone quiet, leaving only questions behind. And for a long time, it looked like her story had ended there. But just when fans had stopped checking for updates, something unexpected happened. A new video surfaced, and the world was greeted with Alice's familiar voice once again. And although it wasn't on national television this time, it was clear that Alice Fredenham wasn't entirely done with music. But what changed? And how did she try to make her way back? After years of silence following her exit from Britain's Got Talent, Alice Fredenham re-emerged quietly, without the fanfare that had once surrounded her. This time, there were no national television appearances or viral moments. Instead, her return to music came through smaller and more personal channels. Around 2014, Alice began performing occasionally at low-key events, like charity concerts and local showcases. However, these appearances weren't promoted heavily. In fact, many of them flew under the radar, announced only through small flyers, local listings, or word of mouth. It was a far cry from the televised stage where she had once captivated millions. But for Alice, it was a deliberate shift. These were environments with lower pressure and more control, where she could sing without the emotional weight that came with national exposure. At the same time, she began exploring independent options to produce her own music. With no major label backing her after her brief deal with Sony had dissolved, Alice turned to crowdfunding. In early 2015, she launched a campaign on Kickstarter to raise funds for her debut album. The campaign goal was set at £30,000, a modest but realistic figure for a small-scale production. But to the surprise of some and the encouragement of many longtime fans, she surpassed that goal, and by the end, over £40,000 had been pledged. The success of the campaign confirmed that, despite her absence from the spotlight, There was still a core group of listeners who believed in her voice and were willing to support her directly. That level of grassroots interest isn't common, especially for artists without a major online presence. But Alice's supporters weren't just casual fans. They were dedicated listeners who had followed her since her days at Britain's Got Talent and were still invested in her journey. The album that followed was titled Under the Covers. It was a collection of jazz and soul classics. What made this album so unique was the way it wasn't experimental or trendy and didn't try to reinvent her image. It was in many ways an extension of the musical identity she had presented on television, which screamed intimate, restrained, and rooted in vintage ballads. Critically, the album was received well by those who heard it. Reviews on music blogs, fan forums, and crowdfunding pages were largely positive. Many praised the clarity of her voice and the subtle emotion in her delivery. It was pretty clear that she had remained true to her original sound, something many reality show artists struggle to do once they leave the spotlight. However, the album's commercial performance didn't match its creative reception. Under the Covers suffered from several setbacks, particularly in distribution. While it was made available through digital platforms and physical compact disc sales, there was no label infrastructure to push it into stores, onto radio, or into playlists. There were also no major marketing campaigns, interviews, or public appearances to promote it. And unfortunately, as a result, its reach remained limited. For an independent release, poor distribution is a common problem. But in Alice's case, it effectively meant the album never reached beyond her existing fan base. Without the amplification of traditional media or the algorithms of social media promotion, Under the Covers was quietly released and quietly forgotten by the broader public. Following the album, fans hoped it might signal a larger return to music, and some even expected follow-up singles, music videos, or at least occasional updates. But none of that materialized. After a few additional small performances here and there, Alice once again began to retreat from public view. There were no explanations or announcements once again, and her social media accounts just became inactive. Her website, which had been used briefly during the album campaign, was taken offline. Inquiries from fans about upcoming projects or performances went unanswered, and as before, there was no drama in her disappearance, just a quiet step back from visibility. In the years that followed, some fans speculated that she may have chosen to focus on her personal life, or that the challenges of working independently, both creatively and financially, had taken a toll on her. Others pointed to pressures of the music industry, particularly for artists like Alice who don't conform easily to its commercial norms. With no label support, limited exposure, and recurring anxiety about performing, sustaining a career likely became increasingly difficult, and she decided to take a step back. At this point, the pattern became familiar. She would make a brief return, give the fans a glimmer of possibility, and then make another retreat into privacy. By 2016, the comeback attempt had run its course. There were no signs of another album, and the performances stopped altogether. And then, for years, fans heard nothing from Alice. But in the digital age, complete disappearance is rare. Fans continue to search, comment, and wonder, where is Alice Fredenham now? And has she truly left music behind, or is there more to the story? After her quiet disappearance, in the years following her independently released album Under the Covers, the few digital traces of her past work, including her album, a handful of interviews, and viral clips from Britain's Got Talent, remain online, but the person behind them had stepped away almost entirely. By 2023, curiosity about Alice's whereabouts resurfaced once again. The Heart's Advertiser, a local newspaper that had previously covered her career, attempted to reach out to her for an update, but their inquiry went unanswered. The article noted that she did not respond to emails or messages, and that no representatives were available to speak on her behalf. It was the first public confirmation in years that even local journalists were unable to make contact with her. That same year, a small but telling detail emerged. Cherry Red Records, a British independent label that had distributed her album, was contacted for comment, and the label confirmed what many had suspected when they said, Alice has retired from the music industry and wishes to retain her privacy. Although they did not elaborate on the reasons behind her retirement, nor did they suggest any future plans. The message was simple and clear. Alice had stepped away, and she wished to be left alone. The confirmation came quietly, but for fans who had followed her journey since 2013, it marked a definitive turning point. For years, there had been speculation that she might one day return to music, perhaps on her own terms, perhaps on a smaller scale. Her earlier reappearances, including her independently funded album and live performances, had kept hope alive, but with the word retired now attached to her name by her own music distributor, she shattered the possibility of a comeback. Since then, there have been no updates, official or otherwise, on Alice Fredenham. Her name no longer appears in music industry circles, and she has not been seen at public events, charity functions, or local music showcases. A search for Alice Fredenham today leads primarily to archive footage and fan discussions. There is no active website, no official fan club, and no public-facing project tied to her name. Yet despite the silence, interest in her story continues. On forums and comment sections, fans still ask about her. Many express a desire to hear new recordings, even if just from home. Others share stories of how her music helped them through difficult times. And in the absence of new content, they return to her Britain's Got Talent audition, which remains one of the most viewed and most discussed in the show's history. For these fans, Alice represented something rare in reality television, a voice that felt sincere, unaffected, and deeply personal. However, there were rumors from online fan discussions that someone once sent Alice a bouquet of flowers anonymously as a gesture of appreciation for her music, and in response, they reportedly received a handwritten thank you note in response. Although this report remains unverified, the story has circulated among fans as an indication that she is still out there, living quietly and perhaps keeping some connection, however limited, to the people who admire her work. Whether Alice will ever return to music remains unknown. Nothing from her camp suggests that she is planning to release new material or re-enter the spotlight. And given her past statements about anxiety and performance pressure, it's possible that the decision to retire was as much about personal well-being as professional direction. But fans continue to hope. Music always leaves a lasting impression, and a single moment, like a televised audition or an independently recorded album, can live on long after the artist behind it has stepped back. For Alice, that seems to be the case. Though she no longer records or performs, her voice remains online, preserved in digital archives and in the memories of those who heard it at its peak. Perhaps one day she'll release another song. Perhaps not. But either way, her story remains a reminder that not every artist wants or needs the spotlight to find meaning in their work. What do you think? Will Alice make a comeback someday? Tell us in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click on the next video on your screen, like this video, and subscribe to our channel for more updates.